All right, chapters 23 and 24. We have spent some time over the past few letters talking about those appetites, those physical desires and cravings that are a part of our human nature, and the ways that the demons love to exploit and turn that against us. We started kind of honing in about the more sexual desires, and there seemed to be a reason. It wasn't prurient detail, but this seemed to come up quite a bit. And we found out last letter that there's definitely a reason, because there is a young woman in his life. And as far as Screwtape is concerned, it is a disaster. This young woman is a deeply faithful believer who knows the Lord and lives in a fashion that honors him, yet does so in a way that is winsome and attractive and joyful. And that's like as bad as it gets for the demons. And so after exploding into such a rage that he managed to transform himself into a centipede, we are back to this next letter where we're going to explore some more about what it means for Wormwood's patient to have fallen in love with this young Christian woman. So 23, we are getting kind of the wider scope of the problem. It's not just the young woman who will be pulling the patient further away from hell. What else is the issue?
Her friends, the group she's with.
The whole family.
Yeah.
This woman is a part of a deeply faithful family. She's got a friends structure, but she comes from a strongly devout family. So she's not some weird outlier that they can try to muster all of their attacks upon. This young woman is a part of this devout family, has been raised in this manner, and has a strength within the home and a support from parents and ostensibly siblings. Why is having this faithful family further cause for alarm for the demons?
Oh, she has all this backup.
She has a bunch of backup, so she's not on an island by herself. So all the more likely that she will stand firm. What else?
Devil loves breaking up families.
The devil loves breaking families.
Right.
Very true.
That is the kernel of.
Very true. And this seems to be very unlikely in this particular scenario. In relation to Wormwood in particular, this is adding to the levels of danger, because this young man is not just spending time with the woman, he's spending time with the whole family. Remember that some of the advice that had happened earlier on, Screwtape was talking about, if this guy starts getting interested in marriage, that's not good for us, because marriage gets him too close to divine love. But we can work on spoiling it by making sure he is attracted to and pursues the wrong kind of woman. Someone who, just because of the way that they are or are together, will make each other miserable. So if you can't stop him from getting married, make sure he's in a marriage that has every likelihood of misery, because they love the misery. So think about it for a moment in the context of a young couple. You have a family that is very supportive and integrated versus a family that is not supportive and integrated. And which of those has an influence on that couple And I would suggest it's both,
Right.
Yeah.
just in different directions. And you know, you don't have to share any personal stories, but it was always very important to me that, you know, my then girlfriend, eventual fiance and wife's parents liked me. That was very important.
How old are you now? Early 20s, mid-20s?
Yeah, or very early 20s. Like I think I'm trying to say.
So that you thought.
So we got married. I had just turned 22 and we'd been engaged for about a year.
But you were thinking about her family.
And I probably started dating when I was about 20. We didn't date for very long before we got married, just you know, a few months. And
You had a long engagement.
we had a year-long engagement, and that was part of being young and not dating for all that time. I mean, we dated several months, but I remember very distinctly. So I had gone down to South Florida to stay with the family for a week. We've made this arrangement. It was over the summer, and it was to basically ask her father, and then I intended to propose at the end of this week, provided everything. I mean, I went down with a ring, provided everything went well, and the week went well. I spoke to him, and Dr. Ungaro was, you know, forthright, and he was very encouraging, also a little on the intimidating side. So my father-in-law is a cardiothoracic surgeon, and early on in the week, I'm assuming he knew what was up. He invited me to observe a surgery. It was a bypass, a double bypass, and I got to scrub in. He convinced the other doctors that I was I was pre-med, and I was actually holding the guy's leg as they were removing the vein, and I was super impressive watching it. But I also wondered if there wasn't also an element of intimidation.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had this kind of perfect evening set up near the end of the week, and her favorite places and out on the beach and everything else, and proposed, and she said yes. And we came home very excited, and both of us still remember this. You know, running into the house, very excited. Her mom was in the kitchen. I remember her chopping carrots. And I remember her chopping. She stopped for a moment and just said, "Oh my God." And then just started chopping again. And it was like, oh. So Lula's next oldest sister had been married for about a year and a half or so at that point, maybe 2. She also got married even younger, like after her first year in college, they'd gotten married. So, you know, that particular hurdle had already been sort of overcome in a general sense, but I remember very distinctly, and it was mostly her mom saying, "You have to be like, sort of like, we'll be okay with this as long as you wait, as long as you're engaged for a year," which we didn't want to be engaged that long, but we agreed because we wanted to not just honor her wishes, but there's a real sense of these are not short-term consequences. You know, you want to get up on the right foot, and you want people to be cooperative and work together. But that's the sort of decision that if we had said, well, we're going to do what we want to do, you know, maybe that causes repercussions for years. And while I don't know that us being engaged for a year, I mean, I can't tease out what percentage of positive feelings that resulted in, but we always had a great relationship with her parents. And, and to this day with
Yours.
with her father. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, she's way more charming than I am. So that's easy. But anyway, I have friends whose parents were unsupportive. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking one in particular. I was the best man. And the marriage was unsupported by the bride's family for some kind of unpleasant reason. We've been a very tight-knit family. And working on the dad, and he finally agreed to come. And then the morning of the wedding, he informed everyone he would be staying at the hotel and he would not attend. And he literally missed it on purpose. And that relationship took an awful long time to repair. I believe it eventually did, but you can't get that moment back. Even if the relationship is better, he will have never been there for his daughter's wedding or reception, first dance, none of that. Nothing. So anyway, having a family involved, this is, we kind of went aside here, but anyway, just the significance for good or for bad that a family support can be emotionally, but for this guy, what about spiritually? Remember, it just seems to be him and his mom, and they don't get along maybe great. They tend to annoy each other. I don't tease out from that relationship that it's anything horrible, but annoying at times, and I don't see her being very formative with his spiritual life. That this has been kind of an awakening or a reawakening of his faith that's happened relatively recently, most likely in his young adulthood, early 20s, as opposed to, mom always brought me to church and mom always taught me the faith, and I grew up with that. Like, it sounds to me like whether she's supportive or opposed, a lot of this has just been him. Well, now what happens when you have a family that welcomes this and that shows you even more? He's still a young Christian. He is still beginning his discipleship. And what happens when he's around someone who has been walking faithfully with the Lord for decades, raised a family like that?
Having cheerleaders.
It's really terrific to see positive examples like that, but to have that positive example then have a very deliberate and intimate stake in you. You're not seeing these examples from afar. These are the people that you go and have dinner with, and that you see all the time. So there is a hugely important significance to the faithfulness of a family, the faithfulness of this friends group, the faithfulness of the wider circle. But there's a quote. I know Charlie found this one, he liked it. It's also highlighted in mine. It's very early on. But as Screwtape is basically sneering at this young woman because he just hates her so much. Oh, no, I'm in the wrong spot. This is talking about if you are around these deeply devout Christians, it's very difficult to hit them head on. What you can do, though, is to try to spoil what they have by overemphasizing its risky qualities. You can have them, you take a faithful Christian and you get them thinking esoteric heavenly thoughts, abstract things so much that they have no they have no earthly virtue, they have no earthly good, because everything is, or and this will come out, this will come around again in a couple of different spots over these two letters. Get them sitting in judgment over other people and other Christians.
That don't have what they.
That's right. So one of the things he starts this no doubt you've often practiced transforming yourself into an angel of light as a parade ground exercise. So remember, we've been told in scripture that evil, spiritual evil, can be disguised and look as though it were something very positive. And, you know, here we get this little aside, they practice it. They practice it like on the parade ground, like in boot camp where the recruits learn to stand and march in formation. Now is the time to do it in the face of the enemy. The word and the flesh have failed us, the world and the flesh, meaning we've been working on this guy's desires. We've been working on his appetites and on his carnal nature. And so far, we keep striking out. So now it's time to pull out, you know, this sort of not maybe a big gun, but a very special tactic. But he says, the success of this kind is the most glorious of all. A spoiled saint, a Pharisee, an inquisitor, or a magician makes better sport in hell than a mere common tyrant or debauchee. So they will certainly suck the life out of your garden variety jerk or awful person. But what's even better is that if they can take saintly virtues and spoil those in a person, it must be all the sweeter. So if you can approach them, and this may not be like in a physical manifestation, but if you could approach in their thoughts and in their temptations as though this were something good, and you can twist it, you can pervert it, you can muddy it up, you can take the good of their faith, of their virtue, of their discipleship, and you can amplify some sharpened aspect that will eventually fail them, then that's kind of the best victory of all. That's when hell really celebrates. When someone,
Like the Pope and his girlfriend.
like the Pope and his girlfriend, yeah, don't be the Pope and have girlfriends. That's the worst. If this is you know, this is, you know, kind of a roundabout thing we've mentioned before, and I think this comes from one of his other books, but Lewis writes about a reminder that you don't make demons out of fallen humans, you make them out of fallen angels, out of archangel. It's this high spiritual that corrupts the greatest. Like when that fall happens, it happens so profoundly with such diabolical power. So the same thing with Christians. This is, you know, it's one of my pet peeves, but I really dislike the concept of celebrity, and I hate it in the church.
Yes.
And I take it very seriously, the spiritual responsibility that, you know, Jesus himself talks about, you know, woe to those who be teachers of the law, or woe to those who lead others astray, that when a pastor goes bad, the amount of damage is so magnified, not just for the number of people that are touched, but the nature of someone falling that others have looked to for spiritual guidance and as a spiritual authority. It either leads them astray. Oh, if he does it, then I must be able to do it too. Or it can break their faith entirely. If that guy was a hypocrite, then none of this matters. You know, having colleagues who have turned out to have done terrible things. I mean, I've seen it. and the damage, the collateral damage, it's like a bomb going on. Yes.
Okay, so. Kind of going back to your point, if they can take saint virtues and spoil them with a person.
Yes.
I think of this as it is not like good, knightly, in shining armor Christian who's doing a great job being a Christian, but actually the testing of this person's faith and it's found to be wanting. You know, that God actually uses all kinds of means so that a person's faith, you can talk about myself, is tested and shown to be thumbs up or thumbs down on rock or on sand.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. You know, we were reminded that God is not doing the tempting, although he certainly allows it. I would say though that we can get into kind of a sort of a predestination chicken and egg, like a hyper Calvinistic, oh well, if you fell it's because you never really believed in the first place.
But I'm not thinking.
And I'm just suggesting that this can be, you know, a time of testing that we are found to be wanting, or it could be that we continue to drift,
Right.
that you can grow, and then even those who have gained a high level of maturity in the faith are still capable of turning away. There is a reason why the term apostasy exists.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can it's easy to dismiss, oh, well, you must not have believed in the first place. I don't know. I'm not going to hazard the guess of someone's true internal life. But there are certain people where it's not a matter of open apostasy. I reject the faith I once had. It's, you know, this is the same thing where because of this faith, I have grown in such a direction where now I persecute others. Now I treat others terribly. Now I do these terrible things in the name of something good. These are all ways, or remember, he's talking about magicians. This is, when he says magician, please remember, he's not talking like Alakazam stage musician, pick a card. He's talking about people who fall down a rabbit hole of learning about spiritual warfare, and they become so focused on, you know, on deciphering the secrets of the book of Revelation. And, you know, it totally happens. People who start off with, I am absolutely convinced godly intention, and something happens and they just fall down a hole. And what looked like it was going in the right direction takes them someplace completely different.
Another deception that, I mean, these guys are so good at it.
So again, this is when, this is like the grand slam for hell, if they can, you know, they might not be able to beat these deeply faithful Christians head on, but boy, if we can stumble them so they basically betray themselves, then there is probably nothing sweeter than that. There is a fair amount then within this first letter, this 23, about exploiting an element of the faith that is proper and right and good, but then if you start inflating it, if you start exaggerating it, if you start encouraging it to overcome and overtake everything else, it will actually consume the faith and steal from them what it ought to do. Take a political point, take a theological point, take an ecclesiastical point, and make sure that that becomes the most important thing, and they will lose it all.
How about an example?
An example would be,
I mean, your Revelation one is a good one.
so okay, we have a lot of political tension within the American church these days, left and right. So ratchet that up where it becomes so critically important for a left-leaning Christian that what's important about my faith is the social justice that it accomplishes. For the right-leaning Christian, that what's important about my faith is that it preserves a particular culture that is under attack, you know, whatever it might be, but make sure that their faith starts getting absorbed by this element which can be very true, but as it grows out of proportion, it swallows up everything that's actually right. And by growing out of fashion, out of proportion and size, it actually becomes corrupt and malignant. Remember that cancer is your own body. Those are your cells, but they're multiplying out of control. And so that's what's killing you. It's not like a virus that's a foreign body. It's your own cells where something has gone wrong, and elements of it or the cell itself just starts multiplying out of control and taking over things it never should. And then it becomes enough to make you sick. And then it becomes enough to kill you. So take some element of faith that maybe seems important to this family or to this young woman. See if you can't work on that and keep pumping it up. Keep inflating it. Make them defend it. Make them see it as critical and essential. The more you do that, the more other things start having to maneuver around it and looking toward it. One of the things that I think is lovely about our liturgical traditions is that with so many generations, millennia of working through stuff, it's so ridiculously holistic. We don't even realize how all these little elements are in there working because they've been thought through, they've been experienced, they've been adjusted and added to. Little things like this. When we have the procession at the beginning or at the end of a church service, who's first? The crucifer goes first. And the people who are standing, whether they're singing or they're doing silently, if you're doing all the little details, what are they doing? They're actually following with their bodies the cross. So there is this tradition that you stand at the procession and you orient your body looking right at the cross being processed. And as the procession goes, you kind of move with it. Not the clergy, not the choir, not anybody else, but the cross. Now, that's a little thing. It's a tiny little detail, and it's not going to save your life. But when we think about those terms of even in the small little details, we're getting this reinforcement of where our focus ought to be. And our focus ought to be on Jesus. When we come for public worship, it should not be, I really like this musical style, or this preacher really gets me. Those are all good things. But where are you pointed towards? What are you looking at? That needs to be Jesus. The Orthodox concept of the icon with its, sometimes bizarre, details are all there. It's all symbolic and it's all there for a point. But part of the reason why it doesn't look real is because even in its conception and its execution, it's always trying to reinforce you are not praying to this object or image. The icon is intended to be a window that you can see and focus, but to go through it, not to it. So like this image of Christ or a saint or the Virgin Mary or whatever it is, there's a reason why they're stylized the way that they are. And little elements are, explaining different things. But, why do they look so weird? Why are they a funny color? Why are they so skinny? Why are they so out of proportion? Because they are purposefully not supposed to be completely realistic so that we aren't tempted to start focusing on the image itself. But by taking the symbols and the stylized nature, our devotion ought to pass straight through it. As I'm looking out that door, and seeing the glass in the windows through the mullions, I'm not actually looking at the glass. Right. I'm looking at what's behind it. And that's, kind of the purpose of that as well. So there is a risk within our humanity to focus on the wrong thing.
Well, but the way you just explained it though, if there could be like one Sunday a month where we go, it's kind of like time to stand still and we all relearn. You just told me stuff I don't think I've ever heard before.
Yeah, one of these days I will pull out the instructed Eucharist. I've done it
Right.
twice here. And I'll do it again at some point, and it's definitely worthwhile. But you know, these are the things that the opposite is also true. He's saying, find something about their faith that is it's right, it's good. You know, is taking care of the poor something that is a real part of the Christian faith? 100%. You know, is defending the powerless? Is it personal liberty? Are those also elements of the faith and what it means, you know, to be loved and made in the fashion of God? Yes, but these things are all there in their own right and proper proportion. But as soon as we start overinflating them as though they are the center, that's when, you know, again, I had this at a funeral and our Sunday reading back to back. Jesus doesn't say there is a way to the Father, a method, a path, a system. He says, I am the way. It's a person, it's him himself. So whenever we are tempted to make a platform or a platitude or a program more important than Jesus himself, we are going to be lost in a hurry.
Would you also say, so the center you're saying is Jesus? I would say also like the Great Commission, that is political power, left, right, whatever. In the beginning of the church, they had nothing. You know, they knew the Great Commission, making disciples, because of Jesus being the center.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going backwards. Is when you said we have the center, but we have all these other things, they get over exaggerated.
Sure.
To the extent that they forget Jesus and him telling us,
right,
go make disciples. In first century, or the Peters and the original apostles, the original believers, that they decided.
Right.
They had no ability to go, let's go win the Senate, or let's go
yeah, but that wasn't their temptation, but it got so bad so early we have to read, I belong to Paul.
Right.
I belong to Apollo.
That's true, yeah.
It's like,
because those
Paul didn't save you and Apollos didn't baptize. So it doesn't take any time whatsoever for people to, as the phrase goes, major in the minors.
Yeah.
It happens instantly because it's a part of our human nature.
Well, and these guys are deceptive. They're working
on this. They're working on this. So always take a little bit of cold comfort that there's a great level of interest and effort being put into screwing you up.
Spiritual warfare.
So it's cold comfort, but there's some degree of comfort. You're that important. You know, you are that valuable for hell to corrupt. They're trying hard.
Well, they want to take as many of us as they can.
So as we are looking in this, and there's a great section here about the historical Jesus. So if you can convince them to keep Jesus at the center, then maybe you can get them thinking about the historical Jesus. And boy, even when I went into seminary, they were still doing that. And that's really, it really felt like a function of the first half of the 20th century. But boy, that nonsense has been, it's still sticking around. The quest for the historical Jesus. So everything is about using their historical critical research methods and trying to find the real Jesus behind the faith, the real Jesus behind the church, the real Jesus behind the scriptures. And I forget which theologian said this, because I mean, this is like, I think this came from decades and decades ago, but as this is really gaining a lot of popularity, he basically said that the quest for the historical Jesus is a lot like looking down a well. The image that you find is rather blurry, and it bears a striking resemblance to yourself. So if you read these books, it's not quite as popular as it used to be, but you know, the real Jesus was a revolutionary. The real Jesus was a neo-Marxist. The real Jesus was an itinerant preacher. The real Jesus, basically, almost every single time you see somebody promoting that, they are promoting a Jesus that they like and who agrees with them.
CNN, National Geographic, those channels do it every Christmas and Easter.
Right. You will get
Do that.
right. That's I think fewer people watch those anymore, but it was sort of a comical tradition that right around Christmas and Easter there would be some sort of documentary. It was always billed as like, this is very important, it's very shaking, and it was always, it was going to present new evidence or a new understanding, and it's like, man, they've been doing this for 2,000 years. That the quest for the historical Jesus almost invariably becomes, how do I find a Jesus who agrees with me? And if I have certain priorities or predilections, then I want to keep digging through the scriptures or the evidence, and I want to find the stuff that supports that, and I want to dismiss or diminish the stuff that doesn't. You read through the scriptures very carefully, and you find an incredibly complex and a very real and human Jesus. There is a complexity that far outstrips a fictional character. And there's no way to pin him down and say he's just like this, because none of us are just like one thing. None of us are just like who can be fairly and comprehensively summarized in a sentence. None of us. So most certainly Jesus can't be either. But again, that should just underscore the reality where he's saying the way to the Father is me. It is through my life. It is through me as a person. This is as holistic and complex and full and compelling as it can possibly be.
Well, because he's got man. I mean, you said real, complex, real, and human. I know you're ready. But obviously, human / God.
Yes, but if he is fully human, then he's fully human. So,
Fully God.
yeah, you're not fully God, and I will never understand you to your fullest. And I don't mean that just because you're quirky, because you are.
Right.
But I mean that because you're a person.
Right.
And persons are filled with a near infinitude of complexity.
Right.
And that's just old finite dummy, let alone. So what I'm saying is I'm starting at a low level, and if that's outstripping our ability, then Dayenu, how much more?
Yeah.
So
Thing.
that is the Hebrew term, how much more. So when the Passover Haggadah is shared during every year as they're retelling the story, there is an element referred to as Dayenu, because you say this word so many times, where you basically summarize all the things that God has done. And it would have been enough but he did more. It would have been enough if he only, but he did even more than that. It would have been enough if he sent the plagues, but he also had death pass over us. It would have been enough if death passed over us, but he also set us free. It would have been on and on and on and on. So, okay, so moving on then to 24. We're still working on this woman, and we're still working on the family. Screwtape, based off of maybe some more thinking, but also maybe a few more reports that are coming in from Wormwood, and he has consulted. He has consulted with a colleague, Slum Trimpet, who was the tempter in charge of the young woman. He has a proposed angle to attack the woman, but to also use on the man. What's the angle? Because remember, this is about, especially in light of last letter, exaggerating a virtue until it becomes a vice.
Spiritual pride.
Spiritual pride. Now, again, Screwtape is experienced and savvy. He knows that if you face a deeply faithful Christian head on he's going to lose. If you just confront them with, become spiritually proud, boom, they will resist it. So the way to get someone to succumb to spiritual pride is to start small. The chink in the armor that allows you to sneak in and just slowly start expanding. This is a phenomenon up north. Can't happen here, but there are giant rocks and boulders. There are sidewalks and roads that split in the winter because a little bit of water gets in there, freezes, expands, and is able to just kind of make this enormous amount of damage that you wouldn't think possible from such a small intrusion. We're replacing the ceiling up in the community building. And one of the things that's caused so many problems over the years is small leaks in the air handler line because the air handler is up in the attic. I hate air handlers up in the attic. Always causes problems like this. But over the years, even after we correct the problem, the damage is still there. And then it happens again, causes more damage, like tiny drips. But imagine what that does over time. So approach her with small little things to pique her pride. What are some of the things he suggests? Oh, Bruce.
I'm leaving to Bruce. Bruce knows it.
Okay. Well, he's going to start off like this. It's an unobtrusive little vice, which she shares with nearly all women who have grown up in an intelligent circle, united by a clearly defined belief. And it consists in quite untroubled assumption that the outsiders who do not share this belief are really too stupid and ridiculous. Now, whether he's right or wrong, he has kind of made a separation in the tendencies of men and women. I will say I kind of share his perspective, but there may be plenty of women who don't see it this way, or like, that's not my particular predilection. But this in general is not that hard to do for anybody. If there's something that you have a very long time association with, to the point where it just becomes assumed and ubiquitous, the difference between seeing that as the best way I know versus the right way,
What's ubiquitous again?
always present and prevalent, yeah, is not that big of a jump. So I want you to think about that for a second, because this is kind of weaving throughout this whole thing. The best way I know versus the right way.
So choir is going to be my downfall.
Choir is going to be your downfall because of that. So think about it in some kind of easygoing terms. Think about something maybe like a meal that your mom made a lot, and then judging that same dish served somewhere else. You kind of can't help but make the comparison, because you were raised in such a way where this is the definition of what this is. And
your mom's dish on your table, you said serve somewhere else,
like going to a restaurant, going to a friend's house, maybe when you get married and your wife makes it for the first time, whatever it is. But there is some element of, this is how it's done. Not because there's been some worldwide consensus and scientific proof, but because that's the way you were raised. But it makes sense to me, it works. I don't like the alternatives that I've seen, but just nudging that a little further into, this is the right way. It's not that far to go, but it starts changing you internally in some risky ways. Because if those other people aren't doing it the right way, what does that mean?
You can't be with them.
Well, just by implication,
they're wrong.
they're wrong. They're not different. They're wrong. Why are they wrong? Why do people persistently do wrong things? Guess. Just in a general sense, what do we assume? You do the wrong thing. Why would you keep doing the wrong thing? Why?
Because you didn't do it right.
No,
Learn it right.
again, by extension. By extension. You're ignorant, you're stupid,
Oh,
or you're
you're taking.
or you're, you know, or you're evil or whatever. But basically, I mean, I'm saying by extension, if there's a right way and a wrong way, and people keep doing the wrong way, we start making some assumptions. They can be unstated. It can be relatively benign. They're just ignorant. Oh, you poor benighted fool. You don't know how to really do it. But that's not very far from just seeing them as stupid.
But remember, I want to make sure you're not going away from your statement where you did say the way, not a way. So I might think like my mom made enchiladas, and
Yes.
this is the way, you know, but that's not like the important way. It's not like.
Are you okay? So yes and no, because we're just going to start off with some simple things. And we're talking about like, you know, food or the way you, I don't know, make your bed or, you know, whatever. But remember, we are still going to be attacking the secondary things and trying to raise them out of proportion.
Secondary. Okay.
So, for instance, a liturgical church. It's not the only way to do it.
Right.
I'm convinced it's the best way, but it's not the right, and there's a difference.
Very good example.
So, but it can be my way of understanding Jesus. The best way or the only way, the right way, that's a distinction that can cause real problems if you let it.
That's a good example. Yeah.
So this is kind of what his proposed line of attack is. And if we think about it, it's super savvy. Yeah. That there's a lot of stuff that we take for granted and a lot of stuff that we have made some basic assumptions on. And we're not wrong that these things are good. But the very subtle difference between the best way and the right way, or the best way I know versus the only way to do it properly, or, you know, whatever. Remember from a few letters ago about the mother's gluttony, which was a gluttony of delicacy? Yeah. All I really want is a properly crisp piece of toast and a properly cup of tea that's weak but not too weak. Like, she becomes those tiny little details become so over exaggerated. It becomes a way for there to be manipulation and control and everything else. So get her thinking she's intelligent, she's bright, she's deeply faithful, and she's got a good circle around her. So she's got reinforcement. So pick on having her think that people who do it differently are wrong. And if that's the case and they persist in a wrongness, it must be because they're stupid.
Yeah, if she and her circle are fairly conservative young ladies,
Yes,
and somebody comes in with a slightly too short skirt,
that's right. You're wrong. And now the judgment and the self-righteousness starts to have a foothold. It's a little chink. It's not much. But remember, that water that gets in even through the small intrusion and freezes can expand and cause real damage. So again, he is trying to come up with some incredibly subtle ways to attack a very strong Christian. And really, that's going to be his best course of action. I don't think you can stand up face to face and like just swing punches. You're going to have to be as sneaky and subtle as possible. So start off in little small ways. Start adjusting her perspective. Take a good thing and start tweaking it so it begins to grow in a twisted fashion. And by doing that, you can start getting, seated in judgment. And then with her starting to sit in judgment, that's going to influence the guy. Because remember, he's still kind of young and naive. He's still kind of immature in his faith. And if he sees this very devout, very mature, young Christian woman surrounded by a circle of friends and a faithful family, he's going to absolutely start to emulate what they do. He sees a lot to be aspirational toward. And so if you can start tweaking that in her and then encouraging him to follow that, you're going to start turning him too. So there is a wonderful level of aspirational qualities that a young Christian ought to have for more mature Christians. The question is, what do they notice? What are they emulating, and how?
Would what Bruce mentioned, would it be he, demon, or whoever, would be like whispering, hey, wear a shorter skirt? Like is that kind of along that line?
No.
Or she
No, what would be whispering is, do you see how short that other girl's skirt is?
I heard that part, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering, but somebody suggested to that other girl, hey, wear a shorter skirt.
No, not necessarily.
Well,
I mean, maybe, but really the issue is observing what's around you and starting to interpret it in a way that is useful to the demons.
True. I mean, at some point, some of this is worth observing. I mean, like, and I'm only talking from a guy's standpoint. If someone's showing a lot more skin than used to not be shown, that's kind of a bother to the male of the species.
Yeah, maybe. But so
To
was
the point where
so was showing a little too much ankle at one point.
I know, but
The
now it's
issue
like
is,
you can come in like a drag queen.
Right.
Taking it to
do you think that's what we're talking about though?
No, I know, but I mean,
So-
it started small,
I understand.
and then it got huge. Later.
Right. And so this is not talking about somebody showing up naked
Right.
so much as it is any difference.
Right.
And especially if it's a small one that no one else seems to notice, but you notice. So now you've got pride coming at you from two different ways. Number one, I stand in judgment because you have done something you ought not to have done. But I also know, it must be up to me because none of you others even bother. I guess this doesn't bother you, but my sensibilities understand just how important this is. So I must speak up. If you're not going to, I will. So you're now an arbiter of judgment. You are now filled with pride, not just against the person you're criticizing, but everybody else who you think they should have noticed and they should have said something. So now that he's got you in two different ways.
Well, this is a quandary. I mean, because it could be like everybody's thinking it, but it's like, I'm not saying it. Or at least maybe one other person, maybe two other people.
If you can get him in a smaller and smaller circle that appeals to him that he is getting somehow deeper and deeper into the truth of the faith, then maybe you're going to either develop a Pharisee or a magician. We talked about the mysteries of the faith, the initiate. Lewis is very mindful of this because it reminds him of some issues when he was a boy, but the power of a social circle, how good it feels to be in and how bad it feels to be out, and the power that a group can wield through in and out. And it could be in all sorts of things, but it feels good at some level to feel like I'm a part of something. I'm in the in group. I'm in the know. I'm with the cool kids. I'm in the circle of trust, whatever it is. And when you're on the outside looking in, the sort of desperation that can engender. And so start pulling him where it appeals to his sense of your behavior is changing, or your predilections or your principles are changing. They're getting more and more narrow. Not because you're becoming more particular, but because you are becoming, it's like you've gotten a secret knowledge now that's reserved for only the best Christians. And that feels, oh boy.
Hey, that's a huge part of Christianity now, where guys on TV go, I've got new knowledge, secret knowledge, like you're saying. And the other thing, the in and out group, that should not be part of the church. I mean, if there be an out group, I know there are, but then.
Well, this is appealing to our humanity. This seems universal. And again, can you use what is good, but start twisting and turning and dirtying it up? Because even those good things can be used, if we work hard enough, to their own diabolical purposes. Anything else? You know, this is what ought to be the blessing. Wow, a potential marriage partner who's so deeply faithful, an extended family who seems to accept me and they're deeply faithful, and a friend group, and this ought to be awesome. But Screwtape isn't done. He has not waved the white flag. He's coming up with more subtle and more clever ways. So it's like it just never ends. And as soon as you think that one avenue is closed off, tiny cracks, tiny chinks. And this is how hard he is working to make sure that even the most faithful are never completely safe.
Except in Ephesians 6.
Except in Ephesians 6.